He thinks he's the hunter, but I have him in my sights. Late 50s, grey hair. He walks like a man who expects people to move aside for him. Stiff, bolt upright, the posture of a military man. Germany hasn't seen a real war in 50 years. Maybe that's why he comes to Africa every year. So he can hold a gun, so he can hunt. 6 years in a row now, he's flown all this way just to feel the cold weight of a rifle in his hands. He needs something to kill, something to make him feel alive. I know the feeling, except this time, it isn't just about the thrill. I weigh the compact 7.65mm handgun in my hands. I haven't used it in years. Sleek, lethal, a relic from my military days. Back then, it earned its keep. I pause. He's heading for the ammunition tent now, and I wait, melting into the shadows. But there's someone with him, a complication I had hoped to avoid. The young bloke, mid to late 20s, light brown hair. He's chatting away, while Kurt Heinrich selects his rifle. Only the best for Kurt, of course. I've already checked out what's waiting in that ammunition tent for this safari. It wasn't hard to figure out which rifle needed a little judicious tampering with. I can't believe my luck, though I always knew the pieces would fall into place. When a mission is this justifiably right, fate tends to cooperate. Kurt is heading into the bush alone. That's his plan, and I'm ready for him. But is the young bloke going with him? Do I have to deal with both of them? No, too complicated. The younger one will head back to camp eventually, and Kurt will go on his merry way. He wants a lion, but he knows his limits. He can't pull that off on his own. Did I make a noise? Kurt looks up sharply, his gun cocked in my direction. Every bit the alert hunter, or so he thinks. God, he's looking right at me. Can he see me through the bush? My heart hasn't raced this fast since I took out 3 hostiles in a 2-minute ambush during the border wars. But this is going to be worth the wait. Kurt Heinrich isn't going to spoil the grand plans of those he has cheated. He thinks he's the hunter. He should have seen it coming. Stealthily, I move forward. I could have done this quickly and cleanly from a distance. But where's the fun if I don't have the satisfaction of my prey coming face to face with me? I want to see the blank incomprehension wash over his features as he looks at my drawn pistol. I want him to know exactly what's coming, but have absolutely no idea why. Maybe in those last split seconds of life, he'll piece it all together, except that my bullet won't be the decider. Oh no, I have something much more entertaining planned for his grand finale.
Chapter 1. Maun, Botswana, 1996. Angie scuffed her foot in the dry riverbed, watching the dust devils spiral and dissolve in the oppressive afternoon heat. She hoped she would still be in Maun when the annual floodwaters finally reached the town, though the drought was bad this year. "Hey, Angie!" She turned at the cheerful voice of her cousin, who'd just emerged from a stand of waterberry trees. Thankfully alone, for her boyfriend Hamish seemed always to be shadowing her these days. "Are you going to the party at Le Bistrot tonight?" Saskia pushed back her blonde hair. Even since the last time Angie had seen her a month ago, there was a more noticeable glow about her. Perhaps that's what having a boyfriend did for one. Angie wouldn't know. "Nope, no parties for me tonight. But congratulations," she said, giving Saskia a welcoming hug. "I hear Rupert's employed you as chief cinematographer on some new project of his." Rupert was the eminent English documentary maker who'd made Africa his home, and Botswana's Okavango Delta his passion. The elderly eccentric had taken Saskia under his wing since she'd finished her Bachelor of Arts in Film and Television Production at Rhodes University in Grahamstown the previous year. Saskia's star was rising. "Is it anything to do with this?" Angie glanced down at the riverbed under their feet, cracked pale sand where the Thamela cane should have been running. "It was just awful seeing how bad everything looks from the air when we flew in from Joburg." Saskia's expression darkened. "And now there's this proposal to put in a pipeline from Rundu to Grootfontein. It was just a horrible rumor a couple of months ago, pumping water from the Okavango to Channel to Windhoek. That's what Rupert's doco is all about. He wants to show all the big wigs how fragile this environmental balance truly is." The penny dropped. "Mum's covering it in the paper," said Angie. "She says all the safari operators are furious about it too. And there's going to be this big meeting in Gaborone in September when the 3 governments get together to discuss Namibia's proposal." "Exactly, which is why Rupert wants the documentary ready for a premiere at Riley's Hotel in late August," said Saskia. And also, why I need you to ask Starky when he has clients in camp. Saskia's request came like a bolt from the blue. What? Angie blurted, too late to hide the horror in her tone. Talk to Starky? Yes, we'll be doing some aerial footage over his concession, and I just want to know when your dad has scheduled any hunting safaris, Saskia went on, as if she hadn't clocked her cousin's response. Why should Starky's safari impact your plans if it's all aerial photography? Well, it's not all aerial photography, Saskia countered. We want to document the river that runs through Zarangu and get footage of the wildlife on the ground near camp, to compare it with past years. It won't be such a good look for a wildlife documentary if Starky's hunting clients are all bagging trophies the day we've set aside to film the wildlife in the same area. All I'm asking you to do is speak to Starky and find out when he's got hunting client at Zarangu around July and August, so we can plan Rupert's flying days around them. Angie sent her cousin a combative glare. Ask him yourself. Saskia hesitated. Clearly, she knew she was in dangerous territory. Please, Angie. Starky has been in camp, or in the air every waking hour, in between his overseas marketing trips, and I'm not going to discuss it publicly over the radio. Saskia paused. Besides, he's your father. Angie looked back at the empty riverbed. Saskia sighed. Sorry. I'm being awful, aren't I? You're only here for a few more days before you go back to work, and suddenly I'm asking you to bury the hatchet like it's the easiest thing in the world. The small kernel of resentment in Angie's chest dissolved. It was impossible to stay angry with Saskia when she was so fired up with excitement, doing work she loved, and in a satisfying relationship with a man who clearly adored her. One day maybe Angie would find that too. But honestly, Angie, this could be a good way to thaw the ice. I know you're cross with Starky, but it's not like he was a monster when he dumped Sarah, and it was months ago. Surely you're not still angry with him. Angie let out a slow breath, then looked up, one eyebrow raised. I really liked Sarah, and Starky just sabotaged, not just her life, but his own. Of course I'm still angry. But Starky is just like that. Saskia's tone turned pleading. A charming, inveterate womanizer. He's never been any different, or tried to pretend he's anything else. I'm sorry about Sarah, too. I liked her, but he'll never settle down. You know that. Angie wasn't ready to let it go. I haven't spoken to Starky since I was so mad at him. Clearly the novelty of finding a long-lost daughter he didn't know about has worn off. She drew a breath as she wiped her eyes. And anyway, you're his favorite, ever since he saved you from the crocodile. Oh, Angie, that's not true. Starky was so proud and happy to discover you were his daughter. Saskia gripped her cousin's arm. Yes, it's true that we've had a bond since he saved my life, but it's rather ironic that my father then saved yours. See, we're even. She tried to smile, but Angie shook her head. Your poor father still has the scars to show how brave he was when he threw himself into the path of that lion. But it was my stupidity that caused all the damage. You weren't stupid, you were innocent and lucky, and fortunately got saved by Starky in the nick of time. Me. I was just plain dumb and ran into trouble, and Uncle James had no choice but to do what he did. I can barely look him in the eye, knowing that I ruined his life. You didn't ruin his life. He'd do the same thing without hesitation if it happened tomorrow. You know what my dad's like, the most decent man alive. And for goodness sake, you were 15 years old. 16. Okay, like by about a week. And you'd just learned that minute that Starky was your father, thanks to my mother, who just blurted it out. Angie clapped her hand to her mouth. Yes, because of that Afrikaans tart, Charlize, if you recall. The shared memory had the odd effect of making them both laugh unexpectedly. How long ago it seemed that the two girls had persuaded the brother of a school friend to fly them into Deception Pan in the middle of the Kalahari Desert, when Starky was taking a German hunter and his son on an overland safari to bag a Kalahari lion. And yet, those intervening 6 years also seemed to have disappeared in a flash. Did you ever hear from Kurt Heinrich's son, Thomas, after they went back to Germany? Asked Saskia. I'm sure he was a bit sweet on you. Of course I didn't, cried Angie. And of course he wasn't sweet on me. Unable to hold in her grin, she added, I think Charlize probably gobbled him up. Or poisoned him if she became his wicked stepmother. Reconsidering, Saskia shook her head. But of course, Charlize was only Kurt Heinrich's bit on the side. You know she was a prostitute he picked up at Sun City. Mum only talked about it when she thought I was old enough, as if I was just some innocent kid when we landed on them at Deception, and we could both see that Charlize was having it off with Starky too. She clapped her hand to her mouth, adding quickly, "Sorry, Angie." "It's quite all right. I've never been under any illusions about the extent of my father's philandering." Angie gave a short, exasperated laugh. "I should be grateful for it, I suppose, otherwise I wouldn't even exist." She exhaled. "But I still don't want to ask him what his plans are in August. He should be the one to thaw the ice." Saskia let out a sigh of exasperation. "Please, Angie, won't you cut him some slack? Or has your mum been getting in your ear?" At the mention of her mother, Angie felt sudden anger spike. "Do you honestly think I'd let my mother get in my ear about anything? Starky loves women and runs through them like water through a sieve. But my mum..." She shook her head bitterly. "My mum has the worst judgment when it comes to men. The worst judgment about everything. I practically raised myself, so don't think for a second I'd give credence to anything she says. My not talking to Starky has nothing to do with my mother." Sorry. I know it's a prickly subject." Saskia held up both hands in surrender. "Let's sit down, and you can tell me about all the exotic places you've seen since I saw you last." She tossed back her hair as she sank into one of two directors' chairs someone had left at the bottom of the Rutledge's garden, where the dry sand stretched down to what would, God willing, in a few months, be a glistening expanse of floodwater. "I bet all the pilots think you're so hot, wearing that smart South African Airways uniform." Angie bit her lip and squirmed, trying to think of something deflecting to say, which was apparently all the confirmation Saskia needed. Her cousin narrowed her eyes and gave Angie a playful punch in the arm. "Out with it. There actually is someone, isn't there? A pilot?" She gave a knowing laugh. "Does he have a white bougainvillea?" Angie felt heat creep up her neck, but then she realized that if she couldn't confess this to Saskia, there was no one else she could tell. Certainly not any of the flight attendants she worked with. That would be professional suicide. "A captain with South African Airways, yes," she admitted, still unable to meet Saskia's eyes. "Though I haven't been able to find out if he has a white bougainvillea." The white bougainvillea had been an ongoing joke between them, their shorthand for the kind of man they each dreamed of finding. For Angie, a white bougainvillea represented calm, purity, and safety. Everything her chaotic childhood had lacked. "A pilot!" Saskia sounded shocked. "I thought with Starky being a pilot and living the life he does, you'd never in a million years go down that path." "I didn't think I would either." Angie finally looked up. But David couldn't be more different from Starky. Saskia gave her a long, measured look. "What exactly does that mean?" "He's honest, not a womanizer. He treats me respectfully. He's handsome and..." Whoa, stop. Saskia's look was dark. "The only thing that sounds different from Starky is the bit about not being a womanizer, because Starky is all those other things. He's handsome and respectful and honest. At least he certainly has been with me." "But not with my mum all those years ago when she got pregnant with me," Angie shot back. "And not with Sarah, who would have laid down her life to be with him." Saskia paused, clearly sensing she was on dangerous ground. "So, this pilot? Tell me more about him. If he's a captain, surely he'd be married, or divorced, and certainly too old for you." "None of those," Angie said, bristling. "He's single and 32. Well, 10 years isn't an inconsequential age difference, and I'm surprised that at 32 he's not married." "Oh, come on, Saskia." Angie felt her defenses rising. "You haven't met him. He has the most gorgeous blue eyes, and he smiles at me whenever I bring him his dinner tray in the cockpit. He asks me questions that make me feel like he sees me as more than just a flight attendant." "Oh, wow, you've really got it bad." Saskia laughed. "I wasn't being mean. I just wanted to see how you'd describe him. So, has anything else happened, other than meaningful smiles?" She hesitated, then added more carefully, "Are you absolutely sure he's not married?" Angie nodded firmly. "He doesn't wear a wedding ring, and I overheard a conversation where he made it quite clear that he wasn't." "So this David, you don't think there are a lot of other flight attendants who get exactly the same kind of meaningful special smiles?" The question stung because it voiced the exact doubt that kept Angie awake at night. I don't know, she admitted, but yes, he is very nice, and I do like him. But that's not a good enough reason not to go to the party tonight, Saskia pressed. You might meet someone else, someone who's actually available and interested. It's a good enough reason not to go to a party where I'd have to speak to my dad and ask him questions that you're just as easily able to ask yourself. Why aren't you going to the party? Because Hamish and I are having dinner with friends at Croc Camp. Saskia tilted her head, her expression turning pleading. I honestly think it would be helpful, for both of you, to break the ice with a nice specific question. She squeezed Angie's knee. Please, won't you ask your dad what he's doing for the months of July and August? I need to start lining up interviews and coordinating shooting schedules, and I can't do that if Starky's got a hunting party at Zarangu. Angie sighed, feeling the fight drain out of her in the afternoon heat. Fine, she said. I'll go to the damn party. Chapter 2. You're all dressed up, Mum. Are you going to that party at Le Bistro? Better to ask now, Angie thought. There was no way she was pitching up at the same party if her mother was going to be there. Susan would drink too much, as usual, and Angie was sick of being embarrassed in public. She'd had a lifetime of it. How do I look? Susan turned from the mirror, striking a pose. She was wearing tight light blue jeans with a white muslin blouse, cut far too low, her usual modus operandi for wowing the local crowd. Her curly dark hair, the same unruly texture as Angie's, had been twisted into a messy updo, and her kohl eyeliner was perhaps a shade too dark. But she did look quite attractive, Angie had to concede. In the golden late afternoon light filtering through the window, Susan could have passed for 30 rather than her real age. Are you going on a date? Angie asked suspiciously. Yes. Her mother definitely had that look about her, eyes suspiciously bright, and a ridiculous number of bangles lined up her arms. That was usually the giveaway. Half for adornment, half for good luck. There's a new engineer in town, and he's taking me to Croc Camp for dinner. Susan's smile faltered slightly as she put her hands on her hips. You might try bolstering my self-esteem by making some nice remark, you know. I might be 40, but I do have a few years left before I'm written off as some scraggy old witch. Or do you think I'm already there? Not nearly, Mum. You look great, Angie said, trying to be accommodating, but not prepared to roll over the way her mother wanted her to. You really think so? Suddenly, Susan was all smiles again, bustling about the small living room, pausing in front of the mirror to study her reflection, while pursing her lips and checking her teeth for lipstick. Hey, maybe you could stay with Saskia tonight, she suggested with false brightness. You two cousins haven't seen nearly enough of each other, have you? And you're leaving in a couple of days. I'm not sure yet. I might go out tonight, Angie said, plonking herself on the cane sofa and hooking her legs over the armrest as she picked up a dog-eared Fair Lady magazine. Not go out tonight? Susan whipped around to look at her daughter. It's Friday night. Of course you should go out. There's that party at Le Bistro, or there's the Duck Inn. Sounds like you want to get rid of me, Mum. Angie straightened and tossed aside the magazine. You planning on bringing Mr. Nameless Engineer back here? As a matter of fact, I was. Susan's chin lifted defensively. He's sharing a room at Riley's with some other co-worker, apparently, so that's out of the question. How long have you known this guy? Angie narrowed her eyes at her mother. The familiar dread was already settling in her stomach. That sick feeling she'd learned to recognize as a child whenever her mother got that manic gleam in her eye about a new man. Oh my God. She shook her head slowly. Is it any wonder I'm still single with a father like Starky and a mother like you? Do you even know this guy's name? Don't you speak to me like that, Missy? Susan's tone was tight as she uncapped her lipstick to add another coat, but there wasn't as much heat behind it as Angie might have expected. Probably because her mother knew there was no point pretending to be something she wasn't. His name is Gregory, if you must know. Gregory? Not Greg? Angie couldn't resist. Well, that sounds poncy for a rough-and-ready engineer. Or is he just a fly-by-night mechanic, new in town? You really do have tickets on yourself, girl, if you think you can talk down to me like that. Susan's hand trembled slightly as she applied the lipstick. And if there's any reason you're still single, it's because you're shooting for the moon. You'll never be satisfied with anything but perfection. And that doesn't exist, I can tell you that much. No, I'm just staying well clear of men who can't keep it in their pants the moment they get the remotest bit of attention from a female. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and ugly. Angie instantly regretted them as her mother's face went tight. And if you must know, Susan said, her voice falsely bright again, Gregory is Gregory, because apparently there are 2 other Gregs who work for the same company. My Gregory is a very decent, handsome, hard-working guy, you'll be pleased to know. Wow, that does sound like a departure from the norm. Angie sighed, suddenly exhausted by the familiar dance they always did when the subject turned to men. You know what? Maybe I will put my head in at Le Bistro tonight. Great. So for once in your life, you'll do something to please your mother. I didn't know that going to a party at Le Bistro would please you, Angie said evenly. But sorry to disappoint, I'm doing this for Saskia. She got up and headed for her bedroom. Have a nice time if I don't see you before I finish getting changed. Angie. But Angie had already closed the door. She leaned against it for a moment, listening to her mother move around the living room, the click of bangles, the spray of perfume, the nervous humming that always preceded a date. Gregory. God help them both. Moving to the small mirror above the dresser, she studied her reflection. Same dark curly hair as her mother, same olive skin. But where Susan's eyes held that desperate, hungry brightness, Angie's were guarded. That's what she'd been told anyway. She'd spent her whole life watching her mother careen from one disaster to another, each new man promising to be different, each one proving to be exactly the same. And the worst part? Susan never learned, never protected herself, never built the walls that Angie had so carefully constructed. I am not my mother, Angie told her reflection firmly. I will never be my mother. She pulled out a simple white cotton sundress. Nothing too revealing, nothing that screamed, trying too hard, and began to change. If she was going to Le Bistro to track down Starky and ask him about his August schedule, she might as well look presentable, though God knew what she'd say to him when she saw him. If she saw him. The familiar knot of resentment tightened in her chest. It had been 3 months since she'd spoken to him, and 8 months since he'd ended things with Sarah, sweet, patient, loyal Sarah, who'd somehow seen past Starky's reputation and loved him anyway. Angie had truly believed Sarah might be the one to change him, to prove that Starky Willis could be more than a charming womanizer with commitment issues. How naive she'd been. She slipped on her sandals and grabbed her small woven bag. From the living room, she could hear her mother still primping, still humming, still radiating that manic hope that this time would be different. Angie slipped out of the back door without saying goodbye. Chapter 3. Angie could hear the pounding bass from Le Bistro long before she shouldered her way through the crowd at the entrance. The courtyard was already packed, a chaotic mix of safari guides, pilots, expats and backpackers, all seeking cold beer and whatever passed for entertainment in Maun on a Friday night. She'd only been gone a year, but already she felt like an outsider in this close-knit community of misfits. The truth was, she felt like an outsider most places. Whoa there, sorry. Pain lanced through Angie's breast as a guy in ubiquitous khaki barreled out of the door, his beer can jabbing into her. He was clearly chasing someone. She caught a glimpse of another figure disappearing into the darkness of the courtyard. The guy gave only a cursory glance over his shoulder, yelled an apology as he registered that Angie was still upright, and then vanished into the dark after his quarry. Bloody hell, Angie muttered, rubbing her chest. Hey Angie, want a drink? Lucy Brennan was waving at her from a corner table where she sat beside her husband Rob. I didn't know you were back in town. Great to see you. Lucy's face was lit up with genuine pleasure. Angie made her way over, grateful to see friendly faces. Good to see you too. Back from your holiday in Canada. Yes. After all this time, it's actually my first trip to see the in-laws. Lucy laughed and gave an exaggerated shudder. -13 it was. I'm not used to temperatures like that. She leaned forward conspiratorially. But I saw Starky this morning. He just got back from Zaire where he said it was 42 degrees, so I guess I can't complain about Maun when it gets hot. Angie's stomach clenched at the mention of her father. You've seen him? She tried to keep her voice casual. I heard he'd been in Germany. Actually, that trip's scheduled for next week, I think. He got back from Zaire yesterday morning. We bumped into each other at the airfield. Lucy's expression shifted slightly. So, you two haven't caught up yet. I know you're leaving in a couple of days, and he mentioned he'd been looking out for you. Angie ran the tip of her tongue over her dry lips. No, I haven't seen him this trip back, actually. Though I do have a question for him. Saskia wants to know his movements in August, because Rupert is shooting a doco around then. She looked at Lucy hopefully, silently praying that Lucy might have the information and save her the awkwardness of actually having to track down Starky. I'm so sorry you missed him again. Lucy looked distressed. He's gone away again, and I don't know if he'll be back in town before he heads off to Germany. What a shame, because you two don't get to see much of each other, do you? She paused, then brightened. Oh, wait! Lucy turned in her chair and waved at someone across the room. Golden Boy will know. Sorry, he hates it when I call him that. I mean Nick. At Angie's confusion, Rob supplied, Nick's a contract pilot filling in while Starky's away for the month. It's Starky's second trip to Germany in 6 months, so he needed the help. Thought you knew. Angie blinked. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised, she said evenly. After all, that's where most of his hunting clients come from. No need to call over Golden Boy, though, she added quickly, glancing across the room. I've heard all about him. Handsome, self-assured, all those epithets that made her want to run a mile, because they indicated the kind of arrogant fly-by-nighter pilot her father was. I'm sure I can get the information from other sources. Oh, Nick's really nice, Lucy defended him immediately. I know he has a reputation as a ladies' man, but it's the ladies who are all over him. He's honestly the sweetest guy when you get to know him. Well, I'm not going to get to know him. Angie shifted slightly in her seat, angling herself so the young man on the far side of the room, she now realized he was the same one who'd crashed into her at the entrance, wouldn't see her face directly. She knew how some of the guys in the Delta operated. Any of the semi-permanent women who worked in the safari business were fair game, not to mention the tourists who piled into overland trucks for the Great Cairo to Cape journey, or those who came to Botswana on a budget and stayed at oddballs rather than the 5-star luxury lodges. Besides, she added, you're safe because you're married. Of course you think he's nice. You're a bit prickly tonight, Rob remarked with a smile. Is everything all right? Angie sighed, suddenly bone-tired. It's my mum, I guess. She's hooked up with another guy, and she's in that euphoric stage. I'm just waiting for it all to come crashing down. She rubbed her temples. It happens so regularly, and I don't know whether to feel glad I'll be away when the shit hits the fan, or guilty that I won't be here for her. Come on, Angie. Lucy leaned forward and placed her hand over Angie's. You've got to remember that she's the mother, and you're the daughter. You can't waste your energy trying to sort out her problems. That's right, Rob agreed. Just relax and enjoy yourself. Make the most of being footloose and 22. He looked around the crowded room. See how many guys there are here. I bet you don't know half of them. Why don't you try to get out more while you're home? Before Angie could protest, he'd already lifted his hand. Hey, Nick. Oh God, no. But it was too late. The man from across the room was already making his way over. Tall, lean. With that easy confidence, pilots of a certain type seemed to wear like a second skin. Pilots like her father, she thought, with a shudder. As he got closer, Angie registered sandy blonde hair and sharp hazel eyes that seemed to take in everything at once as his gaze raked her assessingly. A half smile played at the corners of his mouth, revealing a row of even white teeth, except for one slightly crooked eye tooth that should have been a flaw, but somehow just made him more attractive. Angie forced herself to meet his gaze without flinching. "Nick Hartley," Rob said cheerfully. "This is Angie. Angie, Nick." "We've met," Nick said dryly, his eyes dancing with amusement, though I believe our introduction involved me assaulting her with a beer can. "That was you? I heard the commotion by the door." Lucy looked mortified. "Afraid so." Nick extended his hand to Angie. "Apologies for the less than gentlemanly entrance and not stopping. Are you all right?" His hand was warm, calloused, and he held hers a touch longer than strictly necessary. Angie felt an unwelcome flutter in her stomach and pulled her hand back. "I'll survive," she said coolly. "Angie wants to know if Starky's bringing hunting clients to Zarangu in August," Rob interjected. "You wouldn't happen to know, would you?" Nick shook his head, his frown suggesting he was trying to work out why Angie would be asking. "I'm only here for another 3 weeks. I'll be long gone by August." "No plans to stay permanently in the Delta?" Lucy asked. "You seem to really enjoy it here." "True enough, but the Buffalo contract's too good to turn down." Nick said this with a wink at Angie. "And I'm talking about the winged variety." Angie felt her jaw tighten at the condescension in his tone, as if she wouldn't understand aviation terminology. Lucy interjected quickly. "I think Angie knows you meant the plane, and not the 4-legged variety. She's a pilot's daughter, after all, and a flight attendant with South African Airways." Nick's eyebrows rose, and his smile broadened, revealing that crooked tooth again. "SAA? Flying the big 747s. Very nice." His gaze sharpened. "And your dad flies jets too." "Didn't I mention it?" Lucy said with a laugh. "Angie is Starky's daughter." Nick did a very obvious double-take. His eyes widened fractionally, and he studied Angie with fresh scrutiny, appraising her in a way that made her want to squirm. "Well, I'll be damned." He tilted his head slightly. "Yes, I can actually see the resemblance now. The boss's daughter." He laughed. "I'd better buy you a drink then." "No, please. Not just because I'm the boss's daughter," Angie said, wincing internally. But Nick was already rising. "What'll everyone have? Lucy, G&T, Rob, another castle?" He turned to Angie, his expression expectant. "And you?" "Same as Lucy, thank you," Angie said, offering him a lukewarm smile. "Oh well, looks like I'm stuck. But at least Lucy and Rob were here as a buffer." "See?" Lucy gushed, as Nick made his way to the bar, his khaki shirt stretched across broad shoulders. "Isn't he lovely?" "Yes. And here for only a few more weeks," Angie reminded her pointedly. She reached across and gave Lucy's hand a quick squeeze. "Promise you won't try to set me up. I really don't need anyone else matchmaking after Saskia arranged that disastrous double date with that chartered accountant from Gabs." She took a deep breath. "And anyway, I'm looking for something a bit more permanent than a fly-by-nighter who's about to nick off to run guns out of Zaire. I know the type." "Now that's a bit unfair," Lucy protested, just as Nick arrived back with a tray of drinks. "Did I hear you mention Zaire?" he asked, setting down the glasses. "That's where the Buffalo contract is based." "Is it?" Angie said sweetly, directing an "I told you so" look at Lucy. "How adventurous." Nick caught the edge in her tone, and his smile turned knowing. He settled into the empty chair beside her, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of aviation fuel and soap on his skin. "Adventurous," he repeated, as if testing the word. "That's one way to put it." He took a sip of his beer, his eyes never leaving hers, though I prefer to think of it as gainful employment in challenging circumstances. "Gun running, you mean?" Angie said bluntly. "Cargo transport," Nick corrected mildly. but there was a glint of amusement in his eyes that suggested he knew exactly what kind of cargo he'd be transporting. Completely above board-ish. Despite herself, Angie felt the corner of her mouth twitch. Don't, she told herself firmly. Don't find him charming. Don't. You've been listening to a special preview of the first 3 chapters of Wings Over the Okavango. Angie and Nick's high-stakes journey into the heart of Botswana is just beginning, and the secrets they are uncovering are about to turn deadly. If you're ready to find out what happens next, the full audiobook, as well as the paperback and ebook, are officially available right now. You can purchase direct from me on my Shopify store to get immediate access, or find it on your favorite wide book retailer. Just click the links on your screen right now, or find them in the description box below. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the Delta.